Hello, and welcome to the Art of Being Human. Today, as I mentioned last week, I want to talk to you about the importance of reporting abuse. Abuse must be reported. There are entirely too many children and too many adults that are suffering from abuse, and it's just not necessary. It should never be. And children cannot grow and be healthy if they don't feel safe. They can't learn if they don't feel safe. And yet there are hundreds and thousands of children that are neglected and abused every day. And most of those cases do not go reported, and I think that's really a shame, because children deserve to live in healthy households where they can grow up feeling safe. So I want to give you some tips on reporting child abuse. And most states absolutely require that you report child abuse, and there are various agencies that you can do that with. Now, it can be done anonymously. The reason why most abuse cases are not reported is that people feel that if they don't have absolute proof, that they'll be in legal trouble. In other words, you report a suspected abuse case and it turns out there is no abuse there, then the parents or whoever you reported can sue you, because it's like a false arrest. They've been arrested or they've been investigated for abuse and they didn't do it, and as a result of that, they encountered all kinds of problems, and as a result of that, it must be your fault, and you were the ones who reported them, so they will sue you because you have defamed their character. You don't really have to worry about that, because in most states you can report abuse anonymously and your name never comes up. The other although a person may figure out who did it, but you don't have to give your name. Most states you don't have to. The other thing is you don't have to have absolute proof before you report. Sometimes if you can just suspect that it's going on. You don't know for sure, but you can suspect. And so when you call it in to a child welfare agency or to a police department, you can tell them you're not 100% sure, you suspicion it, you can't prove it. Just let them know that. They will take it from there. And you are expected to report abuse even if you're not sure. You don't have to worry about legal consequences, because the law allows you to report abuse if you suspect it, but you don't have proof of it and you're not sure. And that's the safest thing to do, because then the agency will investigate. They'll find out whether there's abuse or if there's no abuse, and they can find it out. And so you have done your duty by reporting it. As a counselor, I would occasionally have to report abuse, and it's not a fun thing to do. It's very, very difficult to do it, because a person wants to talk to you about things, and yet they're telling you about things that you have to report. So when I see clients, as I explained before, when a person comes in for an interview to see if I will accept them as a client, as a counselor, and be their counselor, I will ask him about abuse issues. I will say, do you abuse a child? Have there been any abuse that you've been involved with against another person? And I will explain to them that everything they tell me is confidential, except if they have murdered somebody, if they've been involved in a crime, or if they have been involved in any kind of abuse of another person, particularly children. Now, every state, their laws are different, so you have to check the state laws in the state that you're in. But almost every state requires that you report child abuse, and many states require that you report elder abuse as well. If you can imagine an elderly person, 90, 95 years old, more or less helpless, putting up with abuse, what's the difference between that and child abuse? A child can't fight back either. Neither can an elderly person. So you have to be on your guard, and if there's any abuse at all, report it even if you're not sure. You may do something that'll really help the person who is being abused. You will not get into any trouble with it. So going on from here, and as I say, in most states you can also do it anonymously. There are mandatory reporting laws, and in 2010 it was estimated that as many as 695,000 children were abused or neglected. And that is probably on the low side. I imagine that there are more than that. Children, you know, they're apt not to talk about abuse because they're afraid if they do, they're going to get abused even more as punishment for talking about it. And the same is true for spousal abuse. When a man and a woman, let's say they're married and the man abuses the wife, anyone at talking, if they're out at a social function, well, how are you doing? Oh, we're doing fine. How's your marriage going? It's a terrific marriage. She does not dare to say, I'm being abused. This is where I got the black eye. I didn't really run into the door. You know, and they don't talk about it. The man usually does not want her mixing in society because he wants the abuse to be kept secret, and so forth. She is not allowed to visit with her friends, to visit with her parents, to go on vacation alone. She's never allowed to do that. She is, for the most part, not allowed out of his sight because he can control what she says because she's too fearful to say anything that would give it away. And if you suspect that kind of abuse, I would report it anyway. Just for the sake of the individual, I would report it anyway. Let the agency take it from there to find out if there is abuse or no abuse. But the problem is, people who are being abused will not talk about it because they're afraid of incurring more abuse. So you just can't go and ask. I know sometimes I will ask children, are you being abused? Outside of their parents' earshot to see what they say. And a lot of times they'll say, oh no, everything's fine. But if they keep showing up with broken bones and bruising, then I'm going to report it as a suspect. I'm going to report it. Okay, so people that must report include adults, teachers, principals of schools, doctors, nurses, anyone that's involved, of course, in medical careers, law enforcement, social workers, clergy, parents, child care workers, and recreation workers, coaches, people who run gymnasiums and so forth. Usually all of these people are required to report, but not every state has the same laws. In 24 states, not all adults have to report. But I would think they should, but they don't have to in 24 states. In 9 states, the clergy doesn't have to report. As a clergy person, and I am a clergy person, it puts you kind of in a bind because you want to help the person. They want help and they're going to you for help. But at the same time, you always have to consider the welfare of the people that they are dealing with. So when I see people, I ask them, yes, I am a minister, and yes, I do keep things confidential, but under certain situations, I might have to deal with an agency. I try to do it sensitively. I try to put the most positive spin I can, but child abuse is child abuse, and there is no positive spin on it. It must be reported. Some people hesitate, as I said, to report because they feel they have to have absolute proof, and that's not the case. In most states, the law reads that if you suspect it, but you're not sure, you still report. If you don't report, it can be a felony. In states where they require child abuse reporting, and you know of child abuse, you actually know of it, and you don't have any question in your mind, and you don't report it, that can be a felony that carries a jail sentence. And I would tell people once in a while, I have to report what I have to report, and for legal reasons, because if I don't report what I need to report, I can lose a license. I can't practice anymore. I could go to jail. And so you do have to protect yourself. But I'm not opposed to the law. I'm just not opposed to the law because I think that abuse should be reported. I don't think it should be allowed to continue at all. If it's necessary to take a child out of a home to protect them against abuse, that should be done. I don't have any problems in reporting in terms of philosophical problems in reporting. I do feel sorry sometimes for the people who come in expecting help and wanting help and feeling uncomfortable about talking about things because they know they may be reported. In fact, I know that as I've talked to people, sometimes they've left the counseling process because they've come to a point in the counseling where they have to deal with the fact that they're not treating their family right, particularly their children. But there's adult abuse too, both men and women abusing each other. And you have to deal with that. And when they get to that point and they're afraid something may be reported, then sometimes they will leave the counseling process prematurely. And I can't force them back. I can't say you've got to come back and I can counsel you. I just can't do that. Now, a lot of people have had complain about welfare departments, and they get their hands on the families and they rip families apart and all of that. I've not had any negative or bad situations with any welfare department or child relief agency that I have ever worked with. I've worked with them, I know what the law is, I always fulfill the law, but when I have to report something, I tell them this person is coming for counseling, this person is getting help, and they're doing better. But I have to judge in terms of child abuse, is a child safe to be left in a family situation or should they be taken out? And if I think that there's any real danger of a child being injured, of course I would want to have the child taken out. But I found with the social welfare agencies that I have dealt with, they are really committed to trying to keep families together. And if the individuals want Christian counseling, they always referred them to me because they had no qualms about me whatsoever. Because not only was I a minister, I was also a board-certified counselor. And I worked with psychiatrists, and I worked with other mental health agencies. So there was no problem on their part to refer a person to me. Now, if a police department, sometimes they would refer to me, I would have to write a report. But even the police departments were very good. When I worked with police departments, they didn't want to have the nitty-gritty of what had been told to me. They did not want to violate a confidential relationship any more than I would want to violate a confidential relationship. What I was required to do basically was let them know that the individual had come as they were required to do and that we had a full counseling session, and I would date the time and sign my name. Yes, this individual was here. Yes, we had a full counseling session, and they fulfilled their obligations to come. And that's all the information they would ever ask for. They didn't ask me for any information concerning something that was private. If it was a court case or something like that, a lot of times they had already been to court, and the court had decreed that they get counseling. It wasn't like they were going back to court for another trial. The trial was already over with, and they would be out maybe on parole or something, but they would want to, the police department would want, or the judge would say that this person must have counseling for a certain amount of time, and then I could see them. If you were going to court, I wouldn't take active court cases because I don't consider myself to be an expert legal witness. An expert legal witness can go in and testify in court cases as to what is going on in the case. And usually psychiatrists, they're considered to be expert legal witnesses because they have a medical degree, plus they have what they're doing psychologically, plus they give medication, and so they are considered to be expert legal witnesses. Now, a counselor can become an expert legal witness if you have special training for it. It wasn't anything I wanted to do, because once you start dealing with court cases, people come to you because they have court cases that need to be seen, and all your time is spent on court cases, or all your time is spent in court, writing reports for social welfare agencies, for the police department if they're involved in that kind of way. And so, you know, I didn't want to get involved with that. I wanted straight on counseling, face to face, talking with people, helping them to grow, and not constantly be preparing to go to court with them, either in their behalf or to testify about abuse that they had been involved with. So active abuse cases, if I knew about it, I usually didn't take. Active court cases, that if I knew about it, I didn't take. But that doesn't mean that a court might not refer to me, or that a police department might not refer to me. But I set the guidelines as to what I would accept and what I would not accept. You must report. And if you don't report when you're supposed to, what happens is that you could be committing a felony. You have to intervene in homicide if you think a homicide is going to occur, or in suicide, in abuse cases, or in crime. You have to intervene and you have to report in those situations. I'll read that again: homicide, suicide, abuse, and crime. And when you report, and when I reported, I always documented everything to death. Who I talked to, what time I talked to them, what their names were, how long I talked to them, what I told them, and that was always kept in their file. So if anything came up in a court case, I could prove I had done that. Yes, on such and such a date, I did report it to the social welfare office. This is what I told them. This is who I talked to. I can even give the time and the length of the conversation that I talked to them. But I always found when I worked with the police departments or when I worked with welfare agencies, they were more than cooperative. They bent over backwards. They really did, to keep families together. And I had a lot of respect for them. So social service agencies become involved. You need to know who you would report to. I have reported abuse cases out of state, actually called state governmental agencies out of state to report something. Somebody might be seeing me for a few weeks, but the person that they abused may now be living out of state, or they are going back out of state, and I think the abuse will continue. I've had to call out of state agencies to report it. So it has to be reported, and as I said, I'm very much in favor of the law because no one needs to be abused. It should not be allowed under any circumstance. In terms of elderly abuse, different states will have different laws. You will need to check with your own individual state, but if you suspect elderly abuse, if I can get the word out, I would report that. I would report any abuse. Animal abuse, I would report that. That really fries me. I can't stand it. Abuse is just something that bothers me, whether it's animal or human or child or adult. No need of it, no excuse for it. It should not be allowed to continue. Well, I'm going to close it off here, and on the next segment, I'm going to make some comments, some kind of concluding comments about PTSD and things that we've been dealing with over the last several weeks, and then we'll get on to something else after that. So I hope that you'll join me next time. Have a great day.